The air on Karna Station was thick with smoke and fear. The alien slave market was loud, filled with shouts, metal chains, and the smell of oil and blood. Bright lights from above made everything look harsh and dirty. Rows of cages lined the dark walls, each one holding someone hopeless. Creatures from many worlds, all silent now. In one of the cages stood Raleigh, a young alien girl with silver-blue skin that shimmered even under the dust. Her large, glowing eyes, once full of life, were dull now. She had been here for many cycles. She no longer cried. Tears were useless in this place. Every day, buyers came. Rich aliens, cruel soldiers, strange scientists. They came to choose slaves for work, for experiments, or worse. Raleigh had seen enough to know that nobody left this place alive and happy. That morning, a new buyer walked in. He looked out of place. A human man. Middle-aged, tall, wearing an old brown jacket and boots that had seen too many miles. His face was lined with age and tired eyes. He didn't wear the armor of the soldiers or the expensive coats of traders. He looked ordinary, but when he walked, the guards stepped aside quietly. Raleigh watched him through the bars, holding her breath. The man's eyes moved across the cages, calm, slow, and cold. He didn't stare with hunger or cruelty like the others. He just looked as if searching for something he had lost long ago. The merchant beside him spoke quickly. "Human, you want strong workers? We have fine stock from the Kalar moons," the man interrupted in a quiet voice. "Show me the ones not sold yet." They reached Raleigh's cage. She stood still, afraid to move. The merchant smiled, tapping the bars. "This one's a rare species. Fast, clever, and obedient when trained." "Her last master, enough," the man said. His eyes stayed on Raleigh. "What's her name?" The merchant blinked. "Name? Slaves don't need names. But the record says, Raleigh from the Vesser colony." The man nodded once. "I'll take her." Raleigh's heart froze. Take her. She felt the chains tighten around her wrists. She had been chosen. Again, the merchant laughed greedily. "Excellent choice. Payment in credits, yes?" The man paid without another word. The door opened with a metallic hiss. Guards dragged Raleigh out. She didn't fight. Fighting only made the beatings worse. Her bare feet touched the cold metal floor as she walked behind the human. Outside, the noise of the market faded, replaced by the hum of docking ships. Raleigh looked up. The stars were bright beyond the station's glass walls. For a moment she thought of home. Her mother's voice, the blue forests, the wind, but it was gone now, burned in the war. They reached the human's small ship. It was old and scratched, patched together with different metals. Raleigh expected to be thrown into a dark cargo hold, but instead, the man opened a small room with a bed and soft light. "You can stay here," he said simply. Raleigh blinked in confusion. "Here?" He nodded. "You'll be safe. Sit, I'll get food." She didn't move. Her mind screamed, "It's a trick." It's always a trick. But hunger won. When he returned with a bowl of warm food, she ate slowly, waiting for poison or pain. The man watched her quietly from the doorway. His voice was calm. "My name's Ethan Cole." Raleigh didn't answer. Her voice was too dry to speak. "You don't have to talk," he said softly. "Rest. Tomorrow we'll leave this place." When he walked away, Raleigh's heart raced. Leave this place? Why would he say that? No human ever freed a slave. Not after what humans had done to her world. She touched the scar on her wrist where the last collar had been. Maybe he wanted her for labor or for experiments. Maybe he enjoyed pretending to be kind first. They always did. That night, as the ship lifted off, Raleigh sat by the small window staring at the stars. She could feel the engine's gentle vibration. For the first time in years, there were no chains on her arms. But freedom felt strange, like silence before a storm. She whispered to herself, "Why did he buy me?" From the front of the ship, Ethan's quiet voice replied, though he didn't turn around. "To save you." Raleigh froze. The words made no sense. No one saved slaves. No one saved her kind. Her heart pounded. Not from fear, but from something new. A tiny, impossible spark of hope mixed with confusion. As the ship disappeared into the blackness of space, Raleigh sat alone in the soft light, wondering who this human really was, and what he truly wanted from her. And for the first time since her capture, she couldn't stop thinking about the man with sad eyes who had bought her freedom with silence. The hum of the ship was the only sound. Cold light filled the narrow hallway. Raleigh sat on the small bed in her room, her hands on her knees, her mind spinning. The man, Ethan Cole, was somewhere in the front cabin, flying the ship through deep space. She didn't know where they were going. She didn't know what he wanted. He had given her food, water, and a blanket. No chains, no shouts, no orders. It was strange, too strange. Raleigh didn't trust it. In her world, kindness was always a trap. When the door slid open, she jumped. Ethan stood there holding a metal box. "You should sleep," he said quietly. "It's a long trip." Raleigh looked down, silent. Her voice was soft when she finally spoke. "Why me?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He placed the box on a shelf and said, "You are about to be sold to someone I know. Someone cruel. I couldn't let that happen." "Why?" she asked again, her eyes narrow. "Because I was like you once," he said. She didn't understand what that meant. A human like her? Impossible. Humans were masters, not slaves. He turned and left, the door closing behind him with a quiet hiss. Raleigh lay down, but she couldn't sleep. Her heart beat too fast. Every sound of the ship made her flinch. A creak, a hum, a distant click. She imagined him walking back in, holding weapons or tools. She had seen humans torture for fun. Maybe he was waiting until she trusted him. Hours later, she heard soft music. Not harsh, not human war songs. Something slow and sad. The notes came from the control room. She stood at the doorway and peeked inside. Ethan sat at the pilot's seat, his eyes half closed. A small hologram glowed in front of him. A picture of a woman with gentle eyes and a little girl smiling beside her. Raleigh stared. The woman wasn't fully human. Her skin was faintly blue, her ears sharp like her own people. Ethan spoke without turning. "You can come in." Raleigh froze. "I can hear your breathing," he said softly. She stepped in slowly. "Who are they?" "My wife and daughter," he said. "They're gone." She didn't know what to say. Humans didn't marry aliens, not the humans who destroyed her home. Yet his voice sounded real and heavy with sorrow. "You're lying," she whispered. He smiled sadly. "Maybe or maybe not." He pressed a button and the image disappeared. Silence filled the room again. Only the stars outside seemed to move, endless and cold. Raleigh wanted to ask more, but fear stopped her. She walked back to her room. On the way, she passed a small metal door slightly open. Inside, she saw something that froze her blood. Chains. Real chains. Her stomach twisted. So this was it. The kindness, the food. It was all part of the act. He would wait until she was calm, then he would use those chains. She backed away quietly, her breath shaky. Her mind screamed, "He's just like the others." Later, when the ship entered a glowing nebula, she sat near the window and watched the colors dance. Pink and gold mist wrapped around them like soft light. It was beautiful, almost peaceful. But Raleigh couldn't enjoy it. She kept glancing toward the storage room, thinking of the chains. Ethan's voice came over the intercom. "Don't be afraid of the lights." "The ship's safe," she didn't answer. She wrapped the blanket tighter around herself and whispered, "You're lying." Hours passed. The nebula faded. The stars returned, sharp and cold. Then she heard heavy footsteps. The door opened again. Ethan stood there holding the chains in his hand. Her breath stopped. He saw the fear in her eyes and sighed. Without saying a word, he turned toward the airlock. The door opened, wind roaring. He threw the chains into the black of space. They spun away until they disappeared. Raleigh stared, her mind blank. He looked at her and said quietly, "These belong to me. I don't need them anymore." Then he walked back to the control room, leaving her standing alone, confused, shaken, and unsure what to believe. She sat back down, holding the blanket close. Something inside her felt strange, heavy. She had seen many masters, but none like this man. He didn't treat her like property. He didn't touch her or shout. He seemed sad, not cruel. Still, she couldn't trust him. Not yet. As she lay down again, she whispered to herself, "Why would a human throw away his own chains?" Outside, the stars shone brighter than ever. Somewhere deep in the ship, Ethan sat alone, staring at the empty air where the hologram had been. His hands trembled and his eyes were wet. The journey had only just begun, and both of them carried ghosts that refused to stay silent. The stars drifted quietly outside the ship's windows, small and endless. Raleigh hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the chains spinning into space. The sound of them clanging in the airlock still echoed in her mind. Why had Ethan thrown them away? No human she knew would ever give up power like that. It didn't make sense. Morning, or what counted as morning in deep space, arrived slowly. The ship hummed softly as it glided through darkness. Riley stepped out of her small room and walked toward the control cabin. She wanted to understand this strange man. Ethan sat at the pilot's chair, reading data from the main screen. His hands were steady, but his face looked pale, tired. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "You didn't sleep." Riley didn't answer. Her eyes wandered across the room, no chains, no weapons. Just machines, wires, and the quiet hum of power. "I don't sleep much either," he said. "Nightmares," that word caught her attention.
"Nightmares?"
she asked softly. He nodded. "From the war. From the things I did." And didn't stop. She stared at him, confused. "Humans never regret. You killed millions. My people—" "I know," he interrupted, his voice low. "I was part of it. I fought in that war." Raleigh froze. "Then why save me?" He leaned back and looked at her for a long moment. "Because I couldn't save anyone back then." Silence filled the space between them. Only the slow beat of the ship's engines broke it. Ethan stood and opened a small cabinet, pulling out a silver card. "This is a passkey. If you ever want to leave, take it. The doors will open for you." Raleigh frowned. "Leave to where?" He shrugged. "Anywhere. You don't owe me anything." She reached for the card but hesitated. It felt too easy and too strange. "Why?" she whispered again. He smiled faintly, though his eyes were sad. "Because freedom only matters if you choose it." Raleigh took the card slowly. For the first time in years, something heavy in her chest began to lift, but fear still whispered inside her mind. Later, when Ethan went to rest, she stood at the airlock door, holding the card in her trembling hand. She could open it. She could run. But the cold space outside waited. Silent, endless, deadly. She stared through the glass. Nothing but stars. No planets, no air, no life. If she left, she would die. She lowered the card. "He tricked me again," she said bitterly. There's nowhere to go. But deep inside, she wasn't sure if she believed that anymore. Hours passed. The ship crossed through a dark region filled with old debris, broken satellites, shattered metal, and burned-out ships. Raleigh stared at them from the window, feeling something strange in her chest. The human beside her had been part of that destruction once. Maybe he carried the same guilt she did. Then suddenly the ship shook hard. Lights flickered. Raleigh grabbed the wall for balance. Ethan ran to the console. "Hold on," he shouted. "We hit a magnetic field." The ship spun, alarm screaming. Sparks flew from the ceiling. Raleigh's heart pounded as the floor tilted. She tried to reach the emergency handle, but a sharp noise made her flinch. A burst of energy from a broken wire burned her arm. She cried out in pain. Ethan turned fast, pulling her back from the fire. His hands pressed against her wound. "You're hurt," he said. "I'm fine," she said through clenched teeth. "No, you're not." He guided her toward the medical station, his movements careful but firm. She watched him open a small case filled with strange tools. He cleaned her burn, wrapped it gently, and whispered, "You'll be okay." Raleigh stared at him the whole time. His touch wasn't cruel. It wasn't the touch of a master. It was warm, gentle, human in a way she had never seen before. When he finished, she asked, "Why do you care if I live?" He didn't look at her. "Because someone once cared if I did." He stood up and walked back to the control room. Raleigh sat there, staring at the bandage on her arm. It was simple white fabric, clean and neat. For years she had only known pain. But now this kindness felt almost worse. It broke something inside her that she had built to survive. Her walls, her hate. That night, she couldn't stop thinking about him. The man who bought her. The man who freed her. The man who threw his own chains away. Ethan Cole was a mystery, and Raleigh wasn't sure if he was her savior or the beginning of another kind of pain. As the ship drifted quietly through space, Raleigh whispered into the dark, "Maybe not all humans are monsters." Somewhere, in the front of the ship, Ethan heard her voice through the thin walls. He smiled faintly and whispered back to no one, "Maybe not all aliens are victims either." The journey was changing them both when he slowly, quietly and forever, the ship floated through deep space like a ghost. Days passed quietly after the storm, and Raleigh began to grow used to the silence. She spoke a little more now. Ethan no longer looked at her like a stranger, but like someone he wanted to understand. Still, there was distance, an invisible wall between them made of fear, guilt, and memory. One day, Raleigh sat near the window, tracing her finger across the glass as stars rushed by. The bandage on her arm had been changed. It no longer hurt. She whispered softly, "Maybe we are both broken things." Ethan looked up from the control screen but said nothing. He had learned she liked to talk to herself when she thought he wasn't listening. Suddenly, the radar beeped, a sharp, fast sound that made both of them freeze. Ethan frowned. "That's not a signal from the station." He tapped a few buttons. The screen flashed red. Pirate ships. 3 of them. Raleigh's breath caught. "Pirates?" "Yes," he said. "Slave hunters. They track ships that leave the market." "They must have followed us." Her hands trembled. "They'll take me back. Not while I'm alive," Ethan said firmly. Raleigh saw something change in his face. Calm turned to steel. The quiet, tired man became a soldier again. He moved fast, shutting down lights, locking systems, and loading weapons. His eyes turned sharp and cold. Raleigh backed away, frightened. "You can't fight them alone." "I've done worse," he said, half smiling. "But I'll need your help." She blinked in surprise. "Me?" He nodded. "Go to the engine room. I'll tell you when to cut power. They'll scan for life, and I want them to think this ship's dead." Raleigh hesitated but ran. The ship trembled under her feet. From the small window in the hallway, she saw the pirate ships, black and red, covered in spikes like predators ready to strike. She reached the engine room. Her hands shook as she touched the console. "Ethan, I'm here," she said into the comm. "Good. When I say now, pull the lever." "Understood." She waited. Seconds felt like hours. Then his voice came, calm but tight. "Now." Raleigh pulled the lever. The lights went out. The ship went silent. For a moment, everything felt dead. No hum, no motion, no sound. She held her breath, hoping it worked. Ethan's voice came again, whispering, "Stay quiet." Outside, the pirate ship scanned the area. Beams of light crossed the ship's hull. One pirate captain, hidden inside his dark vessel, sneered. "Looks like a dead transport." No heat signatures, but another pirate growled, "Still worth checking. Maybe survivors." A claw-like hook shot from their ship, striking Ethan's vessel with a heavy clang. The sound shook the halls. Raleigh covered her ears. "Ethan, they're boarding." "I know," he replied. His voice had no fear. He picked up an old blaster and waited near the airlock. The metal doors glowed red as the pirates burned through them. Sparks flew. Ethan breathed slowly, counting 3, 2, 1. The door exploded open. 3 armored aliens rushed in. Ethan fired fast, dropping one instantly. He rolled aside as plasma bolts tore through the corridor. The fight was brutal, close. He moved like a man who had done this 1,000 times before. Precise, silent, deadly. Raleigh listened from the engine room, frozen in fear. Then she heard footsteps behind her. A 4th pirate had entered from another hatch. He was huge, covered in scales and armor, eyes glowing orange. He grinned when he saw her. "Pretty thing. You'll fetch a fine price again." Raleigh's heart pounded. She looked around desperately and saw a metal rod on the floor. As the pirate grabbed her arm, she swung it hard into his face. He roared in pain. She hit him again until he fell. Her hands shook. She had never fought before. She stared at the unconscious body, chest rising and falling fast. "Raleigh," Ethan's voice shouted through the comm. "Are you safe?" "Yes," she gasped. One came through the back. "Lock the hatch." "I'm coming." Minutes later, the ship went quiet again. Smoke hung in the air. Ethan limped into the engine room, his shoulder bleeding. Raleigh ran to him. "You're hurt." He smiled weakly. "Just a scratch." She didn't believe him. She helped him sit and tore a piece of cloth from her sleeve to press against the wound. "You saved me again," she whispered. He looked at her with tired eyes. "No, you saved yourself this time." They sat in silence for a long time, surrounded by the faint sound of the ship's systems restarting. When the emergency lights came back on, Raleigh looked at the burned marks on the walls and the broken weapons scattered across the floor. The ship was damaged, but they were alive. Ethan leaned back, closing his eyes. "We'll need to land somewhere to repair." Raleigh nodded slowly. "I don't care where," she said. "As long as it's away from them." He smiled faintly. Agreed. As he drifted into half-sleep, Raleigh watched him, this strange, broken human who kept saving her even when it cost him blood. For the first time, she didn't see a monster. She saw something rarer, something she thought no longer existed, a protector. The ship floated through silent space, damaged but alive. After the battle, Raleigh spent hours cleaning blood from the floor. Most of it wasn't hers. Ethan had been hurt worse than he admitted. He slept in the control room, wrapped in a blanket, his breathing rough and uneven. Raleigh watched him from the doorway. His face looked older when he slept, not cruel, just tired. Like someone who had carried too much for too long. She didn't understand him, but something inside her felt heavy whenever she looked at him. She turned back to the medical box and searched for more bandages. As she did, something small fell out. A data chip, cracked and worn. It glowed faintly blue. She picked it up, curious. When she placed it into the ship's console, a hologram appeared. It was a recording. A young alien woman smiled at the camera, her skin pale blue, her eyes bright and kind. Beside her was a little girl with soft silver hair, giggling as she held a toy ship. "Say hi to Daddy," the woman said in a gentle voice. "Hi, Daddy," the child shouted, waving. Raleigh froze. The little girl looked like her, same silver tone, same glowing eyes. Then she heard Ethan's voice in the recording. "I'll be home soon, I promise." The image flickered, then ended. Raleigh stood there, her heart beating fast. She understood now. Ethan's wife had been alien. Half like her, and his child. She turned as Ethan stirred, coughing. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice weak but calm. "I found this," she said quietly, holding up the chip. He stared at it for a long time, then looked away. "I thought it was lost." Raleigh's voice trembled. "They were your family." "Yes," he whispered. "My wife's name was Lyra. My daughter was Amaya." She sat down near him. "What happened to them?" He didn't answer at first. His eyes stared into space as if watching ghosts. "When the war started, humans called my marriage a betrayal. They said I had chosen the enemy. When I refused to fight for them, they burned my home. Lyra died protecting our child. Amaya, she was taken. I never found her." The words hung in the air like cold smoke. Raleigh felt tears burning her eyes. She tried to speak but couldn't. No words felt enough. Ethan continued, voice low. "I joined the army again later to survive. I told myself it was for justice, but it was revenge. I became what I hated. I killed, I obeyed. And when the war ended, I realized I had nothing left. So I started freeing slaves from the markets. Maybe I thought saving someone could make up for what I'd done." He looked at her then, his tired eyes wet with old pain. "When I saw you, Raleigh, you looked just like Amaya. I couldn't walk away." Raleigh's chest tightened. "You thought I was her?" "For a second, yes," he said with a sad smile. "But then I knew you weren't. Still, I couldn't let them take you." She sat quietly beside him. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of shared hurt. Two broken souls from two broken worlds. After a long while, she whispered, "You don't have to save me to forgive yourself." Ethan gave a small laugh, dry and bitter. "Maybe, but it's the only thing that keeps me alive." Raleigh looked down at the bandages on his arm, the scars across his skin, and the tired look in his eyes. She wanted to say thank you, but the words felt too small. Instead, she stood and walked to the console. "We should fix the ship," she said softly. "For your family, and for mine." He nodded slowly. "There's a mining colony not far from here. Abandoned, but it should have parts." As she entered coordinates, the radar beeped again, faint, distant. Raleigh frowned. "Someone's following us." Ethan's face hardened. "The pirates?" "No," she said, checking the screen. "Worse, the traitors, the ones who sold me." A cold silence filled the cabin. Ethan stood wincing as his wound pulled. "They must have tracked the ship's ID." Raleigh's voice shook. "They won't stop, will they?" "No," he said. "They want you back, and they'll kill me for taking you." He walked toward the weapon locker, loading an old rifle. Raleigh stepped in front of him. "You're still weak. You can't fight them like this." He looked at her with calm eyes. "I don't need to win. I just need to give you a chance." Her throat tightened. "Don't talk like that." "Raleigh," he said softly. "If I don't make it—" "Stop," she interrupted. "You will," he smiled faintly. You sound like my wife." Outside, through the window, two dark shapes appeared in the distance, trader ships closing fast. Raleigh took a deep breath. "Then we fight together." Ethan met her gaze and nodded once. Together. And for the first time, she didn't feel like a slave anymore. She felt like a soldier. The cold light of two trader ships cut across the blackness of space like blades. Raleigh watched them grow larger on the screen, her heart pounding in her chest. Ethan's ship shook as the engines roared to full power. Smoke still drifted from the damaged panels, and warning lights flashed red across the control room. "They're gaining fast," Raleigh said. Ethan adjusted the controls with shaky hands. "They've got better engines. But they don't know this ship like I do." Raleigh turned toward him. "You can't outfly them forever." He gave a small, crooked smile. "I don't plan to. I just need to make them chase us where I want them." "Where?" He pointed to a glowing section on the star map, an asteroid belt filled with old mining machines and broken rocks. "There, the Iron Field. It's full of magnetic storms and old defense systems. Dangerous, but good cover." Raleigh stared at the blinking red zone. "That's suicide." Ethan chuckled softly. "Only if you don't know the way through." The ship jolted as plasma fire struck their tail. The lights flickered. Raleigh grabbed the chair to steady herself. "They hit us." "Hang on!" Ethan shouted. He twisted the ship hard, diving into the asteroid field. Massive rocks floated all around them, spinning slowly in the dark. Each one was the size of a building. The trader ships followed, their weapons firing bright streaks of light through the dust clouds. Ethan flew low, weaving between broken mining drones and metallic debris. Sparks flew as one rock scraped against the hull. Raleigh closed her eyes, holding her breath. The entire ship shook. "Ethan, we can't take another hit." "I know," he yelled back. "Go to the rear control panel. I need you to open the storage bay door when I say." She ran. Her hands trembled as she reached the console. "Ready." "Wait for my signal." Through the thin walls, she could hear the sound of plasma bolts striking nearby. One explosion shook the entire ship. A pipe burst above her, releasing steam. She coughed, barely able to see. Then his voice came through the comm, firm and focused. "Now, Raleigh. Open it, now." She hit the switch. The storage door snapped open and several heavy crates slid out into space. The trader ships, flying too close, didn't have time to react. The crates slammed into their shields, sending them spinning off course. Raleigh cheered. It worked. But Ethan didn't answer. She ran back to the cockpit and stopped cold. Blood streaked the side of his seat. A piece of metal from the earlier blast had cut deep into his side. "Ethan," she shouted. He gritted his teeth, hands still on the controls. "Not yet. Can't stop." "You're bleeding." "Keep us steady, Raleigh," he said weakly. "We're almost there." She pushed him gently aside and took the controls. She had watched him fly long enough to know the basics. The ship dove between two massive asteroids, scraping one wing but staying intact. Behind them, the traders recovered and closed in again. "They won't quit," Raleigh whispered. "Then we make them," Ethan said, voice low. "There's a gas pocket ahead. If we ignite it at the right time." Raleigh understood. "You want to blow it up?" He nodded. "Exactly," she swallowed hard. "That could destroy us too." He smiled faintly. "Only if we're slow." Working fast, she rerouted power from the shields to the rear engines. The ship groaned in protest. She felt the heat rising through the floor. "Engines ready." "Good girl," Ethan murmured, eyes half closed. "When I say go, hit full thrust." The traders fired again, a bright flash lighting the cockpit. Raleigh screamed as one blast hit the side, shaking everything. Sparks flew across the panels. "Now," Ethan shouted. Raleigh slammed her hand on the control. The engines roared and the ship shot forward like a comet. Behind them, the plasma fire struck the gas pocket. A massive explosion tore through the asteroid field, a wave of orange fire and shattered stone. The two trader ships vanished in the blast. Pieces of glowing metal spun away into darkness. The shockwave hit them a moment later, sending the ship tumbling. Raleigh screamed as alarms wailed. Ethan reached for the controls, trying to steady them. The ship spun out of control, then finally slowed, drifting in silence for a long moment. There was only the sound of crackling circuits. Raleigh turned to Ethan. He was slumped in his chair, his shirt soaked with blood. "Ethan!" She shook him gently. "Stay awake." He smiled faintly, eyes barely open. Told you. We'd make it. Tears filled her eyes. Don't you dare die now. He tried to speak, but coughed instead, his voice fading. There's a med kit. Under the seat. She grabbed it quickly, pulling out the injector and pressing it to his arm. Hold on, she whispered. Please hold on. The injector hissed. Ethan's breathing slowed, but steadied a little. His hand found hers, weak but warm. You did good, he whispered. Better than I did in my best years. Raleigh squeezed his hand tightly, tears running down her face. You're not allowed to die. Not yet. Outside, the wreckage of their enemies drifted through the stars. Glowing like dying embers, Raleigh stared at the fire fading into darkness and whispered, We're free now. But deep in her heart, she knew their fight wasn't over, because saving a life was never just about surviving. It was about learning why life was still worth saving. And as Ethan lay unconscious beside her, she silently promised that she would save him, just as he had once saved her. The ship floated silently among the shattered remains of the battle. Pieces of metal drifted like ghosts, catching the faint light of distant stars. Inside, the hum of the engines had faded to a weak heartbeat. The oxygen was low. The lights flickered, but the two souls inside were still alive. Raleigh sat beside Ethan's bed, her hand pressed against his cold fingers. He hadn't woken since the explosion. His face was pale, his breathing slow and shallow. The medical patch on his chest glowed faintly, keeping him alive. For now. Stay with me, she whispered. Please. No answer came. Only the quiet hiss of the ship's air system. Raleigh stood slowly and walked toward the control panel. The screen showed damage everywhere. Engines half dead, navigation offline, fuel nearly gone. But in the distance, one blue planet glowed, and small, peaceful, untouched. A safe world. Maybe their last hope. She turned on the intercom and spoke softly. Ethan, I'm taking us home. The engines groaned as she powered them up. She remembered everything he had taught her. How to balance thrust, how to correct drift, how to listen to the ship like it was alive. Her hands shook, but her eyes stayed steady. You once said freedom only matters if you choose it, she murmured. So I'm choosing. The ship moved forward slowly, cutting through the wreckage and into open space. Behind her, Ethan stirred. His voice was barely a whisper. Raleigh, what are you doing? She turned quickly, tears in her eyes. I'm getting us out of here. There's a planet ahead. You'll rest there, he smiled weakly. I told you to leave me if... Don't say that, she snapped, her voice breaking. You saved me, Ethan. Now it's my turn. He looked at her for a long moment, eyes soft and proud. You sound like Lyra. Raleigh blinked back tears. Then maybe she taught you well. He chuckled quietly but coughed, the sound sharp and painful. She rushed to him, pressing his shoulder gently. Save your strength, he nodded faintly. You're a good pilot. Because I had a good teacher, she whispered. The ship continued its slow journey. The planet grew larger. Oceans of deep blue and golden land under a soft ring of clouds. But alarms began to flash again. The ship was overheating. The engines couldn't take much more. Raleigh gritted her teeth. Hold together, she whispered to the ship. Just a little longer. She heard Ethan's voice behind her, weaker now. If we make it, you'll have to start over. New name, new life. You'll be there too, she said quickly. He smiled sadly. I wish I could. Raleigh turned sharply. No, you can. You will. He closed his eyes, whispering. Freedom was never for me. It was for you. No, she shouted, tears spilling down her cheeks. You don't get to die after saving me. You promised I was free. Now I promise you'll live. She pushed the engines harder. The ship rattled violently. The blue planet filled the window. Fire streaked across the hull as they entered the atmosphere. The heat roared around them. The controls burned under her hands. Ethan opened his eyes weakly, staring at her. You're brave, he whispered. You taught me that too, she said, crying and smiling at the same time. The ship screamed as it broke through the clouds. Mountains appeared below, tall, green, and endless. She guided the ship toward a wide plain near a river. The landing was rough. Metal groaned, sparks flew, but they made it. Silence returned. Smoke rose from the cracked engines. Raleigh sat for a moment, breathing hard. Her whole body shook. Then she turned to Ethan. He wasn't moving. Ethan, she ran to him, pressing her hand against his chest. No response. No, no, no. She pulled the emergency injector and pressed it again. The The patch blinked weakly, then went dark. Raleigh froze. The world outside was beautiful. Soft wind, warm light. But inside the ship, everything was cold. She sank to her knees beside him, her voice breaking. "You saved me, and I couldn't save you." She stayed there for a long time, holding his hand, feeling the warmth fade slowly. Later, when the sky turned gold, Raleigh buried him near the river. She built a small mound of stones and placed his jacket on top. The breeze whispered through the grass. She looked up at the stars, the same stars that had once trapped her, and whispered, "I'm free, Ethan, because of you." From his jacket pocket, she found a small metal card, her freedom papers. His handwriting was carved on the back, "Live, for both of us." Raleigh closed her eyes, tears falling silently. Then she stood tall, her silver skin shining in the sunlight. In the distance, the planet stretched wide and open, wild, full of life. She whispered one last time, "He saved me." But he also saved what was good in his kind. Then she turned away from the grave and walked toward the horizon, her steps steady and strong, the wind carrying her promise to the stars.